Please be upstanding for His Worship the Mayor.
Noswaith ar pawb a croesio. Welcome everybody, good evening and welcome to this evening's meeting, full council on Wednesday 31st of January 2018. Please note this meeting will be recorded for subsequent broadcast via the authority's internet site. The images and sound recording may also be used for training purposes within the authority. The public seating areas will be in view of the camera, and by entering the chamber and using the public seating area, members of the public are consenting to being filmed and to the possible use of those images and sound recordings as outlined above. I can see we've got a full public gallery in today, so I would just like to remind the public that you are not allowed to take part in the actual debate when that is going on, so thank you. So, item number 1 on the agenda, apologies for absence.
There's apologies, Mr Mayor, from Councillor Ernie Goldsworthy.
Thank you. Agenda item number 2, declarations of interest. Members are reminded of their personal responsibility to declare any personal and prejudicial interest in the respect of matters contained in this agenda, in accordance with the provisions of the Local Government and Finance Act 1992 relating to council tax, the Local Government Act 2000, the Council's Constitution and the Members' Code of Conduct. So, do we have any declarations of interest?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I have a prejudicial interest in relation to a speech I made in this council, an emotional speech I made in this council last March, and therefore I shall be leaving the chamber.
Thank you, Councillor Mitten. Do we have any other declarations of interest? Councillor Tubby.
I'm a member of the rugby club. I've got dispensation to vote and speak as well. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Tubby. Do we have any other declarations? Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I've had dispensation from the Standards Committee to speak and vote on the issue tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Barrett. And if there are no other declarations, last chance? No? Okay. Okay. So, next item on the agenda is agenda item number 3, 21st Century Schools Programme, proposed new build for Cllr Primary School, to consider the report of the Chief Executive, and that can be found on pages 1 through to 224. I understand the Chief Executive is going to
Thank you, Mr Mayor. For the gallery, if you don't know who I am, I'm the Chief Executive, Gareth Chapman. This is my report, and clearly, as we go through it, professional officers will be adding to input in regards to their views in regards to this report, and then clearly at the end we'll come to a set of recommendations. This is a very emotive subject. We're looking at building a 21st century school within the community of Cefn Coed, Trefechan, etc. It is, as we can see tonight, very emotive, but what I need to remind Council is that we're looking to build a 21st century school for the education of our young people within the community, having regard to public opinion and consultation. You'll see within the report that money is now available in regards to building a replacement school for Cllr Primary School, and on that basis a decision needs to be made this evening. If we don't make a decision this evening, then the time will slip and we will lose the school completely at Cllr. We're currently at the end of the Band A programme. The timescale is extremely tight to build wherever we decide to build, and if we don't get a move on whichever site that is, whether there are challenges or not, then it is still going to be a very tight timescale in which to build this school. and the aim of this authority is to build a school within the community. Council, in regards to 1.2 of my report, the date unfortunately is wrong there. The date of the report was October 2011, but the council meeting was the 9th of November 2011. Initially approved that the site of the former Vane and Merthyr school site be the preferred location to build this school. The difficulty that has arisen since that decision was made in 2011 is that when we re-looked at this matter, 5 years had elapsed since that decision, and things have changed. And I'll go through what has changed, Mr. Mayor, in the report when I come to it. Money, as we say, is currently available from Welsh Government, and we also have allocated capital funding in regards to bringing this school forward. The previous authority administration in October agreed to go back out to public consultation, and again a report to council back in March recommended 2 sites, namely Goetrcoed Playing Field as option 1 and the Vane and Merthyr site at option 2. I think what has got to be noted here in regards to both the sites, that's whether a decision is made to build on Goetrcoed and or a decision is made to build on Vane and Merthyr, part of the playing field will be taken. So whichever site we vote on this evening, part of that playing field will be taken. And it's set out in the report in regards to what will be required, obviously access, parking and sports facilities. So let's be under no illusion that if the Vane and Merthyr site is chosen, then part of the playing field will still be taken for access arrangements for access and for parking, and also for sports facilities within the school. What also has got to be taken into account is if the site was built on, if Goetrcoed was built on, then whilst more of the playing field will be taken, there will still be a playing field on the site. You will not lose the whole of the site itself. So you know, I know there are misinformation in the outside there, but it will be built. There will be a playing field and there will be a community school on the site. Clearly, in moving forward, I'll deal with the recommendations and the conclusion at the end. But if I deal with it as on the way forward, the introduction and background there sets the scene in regards to the policy of this authority back in 2011. 21st Century School money became available back in 2010. This authority took the view that Avon Taff School should be the first school build, and the second school build would be Cllr. The reasons for that is that there was a substantial amount of refurbishment to do in Avon Taff, so there was only one lot of capital funding in regards to this authority, and the second one was Cllr. Therefore, the requirement is why this matter has been delayed in coming forward. Everyone will be aware we went through a public consultation exercise back in 2011, and the outcome was that the preferred site was Vane and Merthyr. Clearly, money is now currently available for the current site, and that's why we're now progressing it and why we need a decision this evening. People will ask what has changed since 2011. Well, since 2011, we've had new statutory provisions in regards to curriculum expectations. We've had the 2014 BREEAM requirements. We've got the 2014 Education Funding Agency Schools for Future Designing School Grounds provisions. We've got the Social Services and Wellbeing Act 2016. We've got the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act, Wellbeing of Future Generation Wales Act 2015, and we've got the non-statutory standards for sustainable development 2017. So a tremendous amount of legislation, new legislation, has come into force since 2011. So the purpose of the reconsultation was to clearly address that and then to move this matter forward. As has been said in the report, we commissioned a listening and engagement session, which then resulted in a co-production model, a report then to Council in 2017, which recommended the 2 sites of Goetrcoed Playing Fields and the Vane and Merthyr school site. That went for 12 weeks public consultation, and again, as a result of that, the results were in favour of Vane and Merthyr site. The next part of the report goes through the public consultation stage, the educational issues, the highway issues, the architectural issues. And what I intend to do, Mr Mayor, is ask the appropriate officers to take council through those areas, and then at the end, as I said, I'll go through the 2 remaining parts and then deal with the conclusion. So the first part is the public consultation, and if I can ask Kerry Dinham, who's the consultation and engagement manager, to take council through that and outline what the outcome was.
Thank you, Gareth. As I said, referring to the consultation process, a comprehensive consultation process was undertaken, and I refer members to page 5 of the report, which outlines the processes followed and all the consultation events that were held in detail. For openness and transparency, an open dialogue was held with the community throughout, with additional consultation sessions being undertaken to ensure that everyone had their opportunity to have a say. Throughout the process, the Council sought advice, guidance and quality assurance from the Consultation Institute, and as a result have been awarded good practice for the process. At the end of the consultation, an independent company, Cllr, analysed feedback from the consultation, and I refer members to page 23 of the report with the findings. As you will see on page 27, 514 people in total responded to the consultation. 426 of these were in favour of the former Merthyr and Penderyn High School site. I'm referring you to page 31 for that detail. Referring members to page 32 of the report, you will also see that out of 514, 213 of those that identified themselves as residents, 200 of those were in favour of Merthyr and Penderyn site. I also refer members to page 6 of the Council report, item 4.15. You will see that 2 petitions were received, totalling 1,503 signatures. Included in these petitions were 304 electronic submissions, which were not made using the Council's e-petition facility and therefore do not comply with Merthyr Tydfil County Borough Council's petitions policy. However, as each person making an electronic submission also provided their name, these observations were also taken into account and included as part of the overall consultation analysis. As you will see from page 54, 54 of the Cllr analysis, it was stated that the exact number of signatures, 54 of the Council report, it stated the exact number of signatures is difficult to ascertain due to the number of different forms it was received on, i.e. handwritten and electronic and duplication of names. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor. Just to pick up that point, and I know there was some groaning in the public gallery, the issue was, even though they didn't meet the requirements of this council, we took them into consideration. So that was only fair and reasonable. So we didn't just disregard them. Our e-petitions policy is exactly the same as the Welsh Government policy in regards to e-petitions, the process, as well as the government. So, you know, if you're going to do it, then you've got to do it in accordance. But that be it, we still took them into consideration, Mr Mayor. If I could now ask, in regards to the education requirements, if I could ask Sue Walker, who's the Chief Education Officer, to take members through why the recommendation from a professional officer's view in regards to education is that the Goitrcoid site should be approved.
Thank you. On page 9 of the report, there are advantages and disadvantages against each of the sites. I'll talk you through and explain in a little bit more detail why I've actually come to that conclusion. The former Merthyr and Penderyn school site, the school can be built on the site, bearing in mind the other constraints with what we've mentioned before with the BREEAM and with non-statutory the guidance that has come out since the report was since the original report in 2011. The Merthyr and Penderyn school site was a high school site, and we are building a 21st century school for primary children. There is a curriculum, there is an expectation that primary school children have good access to the outdoors and are able to have free access indoors and outdoors at all time. The Merthyr and Penderyn site, it will be limited to that. So it's that access to the curriculum, it's that it's the facilities to actually look at that. The size of the site makes it prohibitive to actually meet the delivery requirements for the current physical education curriculum. The site, as the Chief Exec mentioned earlier, if we build on the Vayner Penderyn site, we will still need to utilise the Godra Coed site as part of the physical education. That brings to itself safeguarding issues, because if you are moving children from the Vayner Penderyn site onto the Godra Coed site for the playing fields, it will need more than one member of staff to actually to walk with those children to the Godra Coed site. If we are taking more than one member of staff to walk down to the site, we are actually stopping those member of staff from working with other children, which was what they would actually be expected to do. There is limited opportunity on the Vayner and Penderyn site for growth. If the school were to grow in the future, we've got predictions of how many children we would have in the site in 2022. We're looking at projections for 161 in 2022, with plus 40 nursery, plus 15 of the learning resource class children. So we're at our limit when we're actually building the 240 site as school as we're intending to build on the Vayner and Penderyn site. The Godra Coed playing field, as with the Vayner and Penderyn site, the school can be built on the site. It would give us opportunities to actually develop the outdoors for that fluid education, for 21st century learning, for the curriculum as we're actually moving forward. The site is large enough to expand if there are more pupils to come in, and that's the reason that from an educational perspective and from a 21st century learner's perspective, the preferred site is Godra Coed.
Councillor Brown.
I just wanted to see whether we'll be able to question the officers' reports as we went along, or we're going to do that under question time at the end of the report.
We'll do it at the end on
Okay,
questions.
thank you.
Thank you for the question, Councillor Brown.
Clearly, Mr Mayor, we need a motion before we start questioning, so we'll go through the report, Paul, and then we'll deal with it. If I could now ask Mr Neil Taylor, who's from Parsons Brinkerhoff, who carried out the highway assessment in regards to the proposals, to outline his findings.
Good evening, everyone. Parsons Brinkerhoff actually has been taken over by WSP in the meantime, so I'm representing WSP. We were approached to undertake a transport options appraisal, looking at both sites to identify the existing highway provision surrounding the sites, including constraints for movement by all travel modes, to establish the operation of the existing highway network. We undertook traffic counts, looked at personal injury collisions which had occurred over a 5-year period, an audit of the footway provision, also provision for movement by sustainable modes such as bus stops, and also looked at the existing travel modes used by pupils to the current primary school and also by staff. We identified potential access options for both sites with supporting interventions for highway improvements to try to mitigate some of the potential issues which are identified in relation to highway constraints, and investigate whether the options were feasible in terms of providing safe and appropriate access to both of the sites. We came up with a long list for the two sites of potential access arrangements. These were sifted to 5 access arrangements for each site, because we disregarded those which were thrown out through the initial sift of being non-starters. And these are summarised on page 12 of the report. The shortlisted options for the former Vayner and Penderyn school sites are labelled with an A, so site access options A4 to A8. We appraise these against 5 objectives which we set for the appraisal, and these were around minimising the traffic impact of school traffic and parking on the local highway network for all users, providing pedestrian users with legible and safe routes to school, identifying an appropriate access strategy, which didn't compromise land left available then for school buildings and associated facilities. Provide access options which minimise the impact on local residents and landowners, and provided appropriate access for construction vehicles, servicing and access to the site for emergency vehicles. In terms of highway, I'm sure many of you are aware of the existing highway provision around the two sites. Around the former Vena and Penderyn school, the highway is constrained in terms of footway provision and available road widths. We undertook parking surveys as well to show the level of on-street parking which currently takes place. In terms of our appraisal for access, the 5 access options for the the Vena and former Penderyn school site, there was only one which we got a positive score, which was A8, which is shown indicatively on page 14 of the report, and that was for vehicular access to be taken from the south via Merthyr through the field site, utilising parking provision off-site because it was identified there would be insufficient space on the former school site to provide off-street drop-off and pick-up, except for disabled users. So users of the site would then be required to walk from a park and stride facility provided on the playing field site up Godricoid Road. We'd need to make improvements in terms of providing a continuous footway because that doesn't currently exist, and also providing appropriate crossing facilities to gain access to the site. The opportunities and constraints are set out on the figure for option A8. Some of the other constraints with this option include, for example, we've indicated a one-way arrangement, and that's due to the requirement for providing a footway narrowing the current road width on Godricoid Road. So that would impact on residents currently who use that road to gain access to their properties. They would have to use the one-way system, which would cause significant diversion to them. Also, in terms of vehicular traffic generation, based on existing traffic modes that we used for the current primary school, we estimated there'd be around 100 car trips associated with pupils and around 27 associated with staff movements. So we're looking at around 127 movements at the start and end of the school day. Pontycapel Road is quite constrained in terms of its width. It doesn't have a continuous footway at present, and there are obstructions in terms of wheelie bins currently on the footway, which I think are generally there most of the time. So in terms of access to the site by those who may be are trying to access the site with push chairs or young children who have to move around those obstacles, there were constraints obviously identified in terms of access using site A8, the A8 option arrangement, but this was the most viable in terms of gaining access of the ones that we looked at. Moving on to the options for access to the playing field site, they were labelled B7 through to B11. Generally, they scored much better against our transport planning objectives. The preferred option was B10, which is shown on page 15 of the report, and it shows that movements to and from the site would be from the existing residential area to the south. This would enable vehicular movements to use roads of more adequate width. There's also continuous footway provision to the site using this method along High Street and then down through the residential area, which is obviously much more recent and has been built to more current standards than areas to the north. This option would require potentially some amendments to the mini roundabout junction, which is currently formed on the main road, to enable access by coaches and large vehicles such as 15-metre coaches if they're required to enter the site. For the former Vayner and Penderyn school site, it'd be very problematic getting coaches, particularly large coaches, to that site, and using the access option shown in A8, we did some vehicular tracking which showed it'd be a very tight movement coming up Godric Coed Road and turning right to leave the site via Pontycapel Road. So in terms of our recommendations, in terms of transport and access, the former playing field site is preferable in terms of ensuring safe and effective access, appropriate access to the site. In terms of if the former secondary school site is used, then mitigation would be required. We have identified a number of options which we would need to explore in further detail during a detailed design phase. At the moment, these are suggested based on the preliminary layouts which have been developed for the site. They include things like a 20-mile-an-hour speed restriction zone, improvements to footways, new crossing facilities on Pontycapel Road and also on High Street. And also, if the playing field site is used, there is potential then on the former secondary school site to undertake improvements to NMU routes, non-motorised user routes across that site, and also create maybe a turning facility for users of South Terrace, because currently it's quite difficult for vehicles to turn on that street. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Next, I will ask Jim Allen, who will take Council through the technical design and build section of the report.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you. My comments and observations are specifically related to the architectural and technical aspects of the scheme. My team and I undertook an extensive analysis of both sites and tested a number of indicative layouts which we refined as more information became available. It's clear that both sites can accommodate a primary school which will be a better replacement than the current Cllr School. The Vayner and Penderyn site is too small to meet the 1999 Schools and Grounds regulations. However, there are numerous instances where schools have been built in sites which under the regulations are deemed to be too small. The implications of this are that there are minimal parking opportunities on site, most likely limited to disabled parking only. Sorry, is that better? Right. Apologies. Do you want me to start again? Okay. Sorry, I'll start again. Right. My comments and observations are specifically related to the architectural and technical aspects of the scheme. My team and I undertook an extensive analysis of both sites and tested a number of indicative layouts which were refined as more and more information became available. It's clear that both sites can accommodate a primary school which will be a better replacement than the current Cllr School. The Vayner and Penderyn site is too small to meet the 1999 Schools and Grounds regulations, but there are numerous instances where schools have been built on sites which, under the regulations, are deemed to be too small. The implications of this, in reality, are that there will be minimum parking opportunities on site, which are most likely be limited to disabled parking only. The range of external learning, social and activity spaces does not meet expectations or the standards that one would currently expect to find elsewhere, or one would currently expect to find of a 21st century school, as Sue's already explained. The area of the school, the physical area of the school itself, will be smaller due to the constrained site, and the building, the actual building itself, offers no future expansion potential. Although building a new school is clearly feasible on the site, the shortcomings and compromises that the site introduces will be present for the life of the school. The Godricoid site, by contrast, is larger, it's flatter, it's got much better vehicular access, it offers far more flexibility, it has space for expansion, and a much larger site area for social learning and sporting activities. It also has more opportunities for links with the community. There are two principal drawbacks with the Godricoid site. The first is community opposition and loss of playing area. To an extent, from our preliminary work, we think this can be mitigated. Whether this is good enough, we won't know, and we can't know until unless we work with the community. The ground conditions also aren't known. The implications of this are increased costs for development of the school. It is possible to build on pretty much any site. It's just a matter of how much it costs to mitigate the site conditions and problems. But in summary, the Godricoid field site is a superior site in every architectural aspect. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. There is just one slight correction to be made in the table at 440. Those members who will have read the advantages and disadvantages will note that in former Vane and Penderyn, one of the disadvantages was that the fields are protected by fields in trust. That's also applicable to Goitracoid playing fields as well. Whilst we say loss of public open space, the field obviously is protected by the fields in trust, so that amendment does just need to be made. 442 of the report, Mr. Mayor, then deals with the planning issues. I don't intend to deal with the planning issues because whichever site moves forward will be dealt with in another place, and we just need to be mindful about predetermination and predisposition in dealing with that. But you can read in the report what the planning officer has actually indicated, but just to be mindful, whilst the development is acceptable, I can say it because I won't be at planning committee, is that, you know, they will need to be assessed, and that is clearly laid out within the report. 443 to 447 deals with the fields in trust. Again, we're all aware that whichever site goes forward, we will need to take some of the land for the school provision. The fields in trust does not preclude us from doing anything. All it requires us to do is go through a process. The fields in trust cannot unreasonably withhold their consent in regards to what we want to do, but obviously we have to satisfy various criteria in moving that forward. But whichever site is taken forward, there will be a need to provide alternative replacement land for that taken. We deal with the surplus sites, and again, Mr. Mayor, again, this is looking to the future. Clearly there's an issue in regards to the current Cllr primary school site and the site of Treveccan Nursery, and you'll see there the process this council adopts in regards to moving forward. If the decision was made to go on the Goitracoid playing field site, then the former Vainer and Penderyn site would be surplus requirement. And again, I say in this chamber, as I said in public consultation, no decision has been made in regards to that site, should Goitracoid be used, and we would go out to public consultation in regards to the usage of that site in moving forward. And again, the highways engineer has indicated if you live on South Terrace, you drive in and you reverse out. So that would be something we would discuss. There's a lot of preconception out there. There's no decision made by this council, and I'm sure the leader of the council will pick that up in due course in regards to that site. The financial implications, the project timetable is set out in 450 there. You'll see it is a very tight timescale. Construction we hope is to start in November, December, completion in March 2020, and we hope that the school will be occupied by Easter 2020. Financial implications are set out there, which confirms our funding. However, if we don't get ahead with this, we may lose it, and the equalities impact assessment was carried out, Mr. Mayor. If I then take you all back to paragraph 1.7 of the report, the conclusions are that whilst it's acknowledged that both sites are viable to accommodate the new school, it's the professional officers' advice, and you've heard it from each of them this evening, and it's our recommendation that we should build on the Cllr site for the reasons stated by the professional officers. I'm sure that we'll have a discussion or debate about the word viable. The word viable means capable of becoming actual. However, and I'm sure the leader will pick this up, there are compromises to be had on both sides. And again, those have been picked up in moving forward. Clearly, 1.9 picks up the strength of feeling in regards to the public and the result of the public consultation. And as I've said, that officers, despite having a professional officer view that we should build on Cllr, have not disregarded those views. We've had due regard to them, but we, as I said at the very beginning, are looking at building a 21st century school for our pupils within the county borough, and it is the Cllr site that delivers that for the future generations of this county borough. Recommendations, Mr. Mayor, are set out in 2.1 to 2.4. Clearly, 2.1 is asking for council's instructions in regards to whether option 1 or option 2 is put forward in regards to this process. You've got my view as the officer that I would commend to you the recommendation that we build on option in Cllr, which is option 1 for the reasons stated in the report, but clearly I'll be guided by council in regards to the decision this council wishes to make. Irrespective of which decision you make in 2.1, we need the other recommendations in regards to 2.2 to 2.4. There may be issues around the delegated power being granted to me in consultation with the leaders. As I said, time is of the essence here. We haven't got time to keep coming back to this council and debating. We need to move this project into a build, wherever that may be, whether that be in Cllr or Vaynham, and wherever it is, we need to start building this as soon as possible. That gives me the power with the leader and the leader of the opposition to have a discussion in regards to moving this forward at pace. I commend the recommendations to you, Mr. Mayor, and I wait instructions in regards to paragraph 2.1.
Thank you, Gareth. I understand Councillor Andrew Barry is going to propose this one.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Due to the media frenzy, the political administrative wrangling over the years, it's only right that this administration will ask for a recorded vote, and we'll come to that after we've been through the recommendations. I refer to the recommendations encapsulated what we believe in point 1.9. In essence, the officer's opinion is that either site is viable. Would this authority be happy to be building on a green site or a brownfield site? Do we support the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act? Yes, we absolutely do. And finally, because of the overwhelming result of the public consultation process, we recommend option 2 of 2.1, that the former Vaynham and Penderyn School site should be approved as the preferred location for the new Cllr primary school. 2.2, the approved site be appropriated for planning purposes and delegated authority be provided to the Chief Officer, Neighbourhood Services, to implement the appropriation process. 2.3, should any replacement land be required to address that being lost as a result of the new school proposal and in accordance with the provision of the Fields and Trust Deeds of Dedication, the following site be proposed: Teddington's Field, 9293 metres squared, and the Black Patch, 17,956 metres squared. 2.4, delegated powers be granted to the Chief Executive in consultation with the leaders, the leader and the leader of opposition, to take all and any steps and actions necessary to progress the new school build. I move.
I second the motion and reserve the right to comment.
Thank you. Do we have any questions? Councillor Chris Barry.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I did have 3 questions. Gareth has answered one about viability, so for now I've only got 2 questions, Mr Mayor. Mr Mayor, we told in the report that one of the sites fails to meet certain standards. We talked about the education, school premises regulations and others, and only one site offers the size and flexibility to accommodate a school that meets standards and aspirations for 21st century school. So, Mr Mayor, can I ask, has anyone thought to ask Welsh Government if they would be prepared to fund a build on an unsuitable site when there is a suitable site available? If the answer is yes, what was the answer of Welsh Government? And if the answer is no, they have been asked, why not?
There is no need for us to actually consult with Welsh Government on where we build school sites. It is a council decision. The only people that we have to consult with are Estyn, who are the inspectorate for schools. Estyn were consulted as part of the consultation, and they made the statement that either site was viable.
So, Mr Mayor, just to be clear, that's a guarantee that Welsh Government absolutely will fund a site on school on either site?
We haven't. Welsh Government have agreed the funding for Cllr school as part of the Band A funding. The decision as to where it is sits with the council.
Does that answer your question, Councillor Barry?
Yeah, that answers my first one, Mr Mayor. Mr Mayor, the other question I'm going to ask is, for now, is in a transport options appraisal, the Goedwig site scores better in all aspects. Should Council tonight decide to go for the Vein and Bederen site, what would happen if there was a serious accident there? And I'm asking this bearing in mind the fact that the Gent Council, Cardiff Council, only in the last few weeks have been taken to court under health and safety legislation. What would happen to us when we've been warned that there are these problems with the site, and if, God forbid, something happened?
At the moment, the transport options appraisal is looking at quite a high level at preliminary access options. They will need to be developed further, and as part of that, a road safety audit will need to be undertaken for any changes to the highway layout. If we're providing new pedestrian crossings, for example, they will need to be subject to a full audit in terms of safety. So any changes to the access options and layout will need to be subject to detailed design and full road safety audit.
Mr Mayor, if I can add, again, our health and safety officer was asked this question, and the response is, in regards to the school at Moysteg, which we're talking about, that case actually concerned a fatal accident on the school grounds, so it was within the school curtilage. So that was the first thing. Again, all movement of vehicle or traffic on the school site should be assessed and determine whether there are any risks from vehicle or pedestrian collisions in a properly managed school site. We as a council will obviously need to undertake a full risk assessment of vehicle and movements at the school in all of its existing, in all our areas, and they will continue to be reviewed. The point that the health and safety officer actually did make, though, is that if it's been pointed out that it is reasonably foreseeable on the public highway that this could happen, and it's been pointed out in an expert's report, then we would need to look at that from a legal standpoint in moving forward.
The only thing that I would add to that is that there is always the risk that somebody would take action against the council if they could see that there was a causal link between any accident that happened and any decision that the council had made. So it's one of those things which is so broad, it's very difficult to say specifically, yes, that the council could face action being taken against it. But if there was found to be something that you knew and were told about, and then there was some accident happened as a result, then there would be a risk.
Councillor Carter.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I did have a question written down, Mr. Mayor, but I thought Gareth had answered my question when he was going through his speech earlier on, but listening to what Councillor Andrew Barry has just stated in the recommendations, I'm not quite sure. So I just need to confirm, on the professional officer's point of view in this council, that the preferred site is the playing fields.
Yes, that's quite right. Even though both sites are viable, as I said, there is a compromise to be had. It is capable of being delivered, but the professional officer view, for all the reasons given in the report, is that Goetre Coed is the preferred site of officers for this authority.
Councillor Thomas.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I've got a question on planning, because I won't be predisposing on the planning committee. As we know, Goetre Coed is a greenfield site and is in our open spaces plan and protected by a deed of dedication. Does building on the site fit with our planning policy?
Building on Goetre Coed or building on? The LDP follows Welsh Government policy in respect of brownfield first. When the planning application is presented, obviously we'll consider all the detail that will come with that, and a decision will be made by planning committee at that point.
And the second question I got is, would a planning application on Goetre Coed have more objections and likely to cause a delay which could adversely affect our 21st century school building programme?
I can't really answer that, whether it would have more objections or not, until the application comes in.
Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have more than one question. Can I take you to page 9 of the overarching report? And it's under the heading Officer Feedback under 4.30 and refers to the advantages and disadvantages. My question is in relation to the former Veyna Penderian school site. I'll read out the first part there, and it's been touched upon by the Chief Education Officer, and I quote, "Size of the site makes it prohibitive to the delivery of the requirements for physical education." Can I ask the Chief Education Officer what are the implications in that particular statement for the children?
The implications are that if you build on the Veyna and Penderian site, we will have to use the Goetre Coed site for part of to meet the requirements of the physical education site. If you're using, excuse me, if you're then using the Goetre Coed site, we have to the children have to be walked from the Veyna and Penderian site to the Goetre Coed site. If you build on if you've got one site with access to physical education, is one teacher can actually take the children out. If you have to walk the children to the Goetre Coed site, they will need more than one member of staff to walk them to the site. So you actually you're detracting from other members of staff working with other children.
Yes, thank you for that. That leads me into the second question, which is in relation to that, and that's the second point down, and I'll read what's in the disadvantages. As use of Goetre Coed site is required for the delivery of physical education on a regular basis, this would lead to a higher staff-to-pupil ratio when walking pupils to the site due to safeguarding requirements. Can you tell me what is the ratio of staff to pupils, bearing in mind that this is a 3 to 11 years of age school? How often will the pupils and the staff be leaving the school? And who makes the risk assessment, which I understand is likely to be left entirely with the school?
take your last point first. Yes, it is the head teacher that carries out the risk assessment. We currently have a service level agreement with the Central South Consortium, so advice can be sought from the consortium as to risk assessing. We would also work very closely with our own health and safety officers to support the head teacher and the governing body in carrying out the risk assessments. For the number of staff, it would depend on the age group of the children. If you're taking the younger children down to the site, you would need 1 to 10, a ratio of 1 to 10. If you're looking at the older children, 1 to 15. If you're looking at the number of times that they would be utilising the site, the expectation is that all pupils have 120 minutes of physical education a week. 1 hour of that would be internal. I would expect that to be in the gym, in the hall, which would be sort of internal, and 1 hour of that to be external games facilities. So it's once a week for each class, at least once a week for each class. If you're actually looking at outdoor education, I've said about some opportunities to have outdoor learning areas. It would be limited on that site, so you could very well be using the Godricide site for other activities as opposed to physical education. You'd be utilising the outdoors. And again, you'd have the restrictions of the safeguarding.
It's not involved in the report, but it's an obvious question if anybody's got young children or grandchildren. Would there be toilet facilities on the Cllr site when they're out of school?
There will be the community facilities, which we would have to seek permission to actually be able to utilise that. I don't know that one, actually.
Would there be toilets at the, will we have to build specific toilets for the young people on the playing fields?
Generally, if you look at the overall distance between the playing fields and the actual school, there are a number of school sites which have a similar distance for pupils to walk between the playing fields and the main school building, so I wouldn't consider it necessary to construct new toilets. The bigger issue is having teachers accompany pupils who want to go back to the toilets, back to the main school building. So I don't necessarily think that's a building problem, although it could be accommodated. It is a potential to refurbish the community facilities and make them open to children, but that opens a whole series of other debates as to cost and to supervision and suitability, and I think that's beyond us at this stage.
Thank you.
Councillor,
can I take you?
Any more?
Yes.
You got them.
Yes.
Okay.
Can you take you to page 17, under 4.41, under the heading Technical and Build Recommendation. And I read out that short paragraph. It says, although both sites can accommodate a school of the required size, only the Godricide site offers the size and flexibility to be able to accommodate a school which meets the standards and aspirations for a 21st century school. Can you explain to me, and perhaps to all the other members here, what are the standards and particularly aspirations for a 21st century school?
I can only really answer part of this. I mean, Sue has already elaborated how the 21st Century Schools programme places a great degree of importance on external learning spaces and particular types of learning spaces for different types of curriculum activities. Now, it goes without saying that the larger site area that one has available, the greater range of opportunities one will have to develop different types of curricular activities. It's probably up for Sue to elaborate in a little bit more detail exactly what that means for the curriculum. Certainly in terms of the building area internally, a larger area means we've got an opportunity for larger resource areas, breakout areas and things like that.
If you're actually delivering a 21st, if we're delivering a 21st curriculum, As part of the foundation phase, there's the expectation that the children have continuous access to the outdoors, and good practice under the 21st century and a successful futures curriculum would be that we offer that same opportunity to the Key Stage 2 pupils. There is an expectation that within foundation phase you deliver what's called forest schools, which is utilising the outdoors as learning. That would be on the same site, so you're looking at actually developing a site that can manage all those areas. You need the physical education, which is the formal games. You also need outdoor learning space to do forest schools, to do design work outside, to do artwork outside. That's what we're talking about for 21st century schools facilities.
And my last question at the moment is on page 17 again, and it's under 4.42. I hesitate to ask this question, but it is there, and it's in relation to planning. I read it out. In principle, the proposed development is acceptable at either site. However, matters such as siting, design, external appearance, landscaping, access, highway safety, etc. will be considered at the application stage. Goes on to say at which point an assessment will be made as to whether or not the proposed development complies with the policies of the adopted LDP, which is the Local Development Plan. Could I ask Mr. Mayor, the planning officer, and I am a member of the planning committee, examples of some of the policies that will have to be taken into account in the adopted Local Development Plan?
Thanks, Chair. The main policy is BW16, and that's the protection of open spaces and playing fields. Other policies include BW7, which is a design policy. There's also policies that consider residential amenity, highway safety, those sort of things.
Any more questions, Clive? Councillor Tony Rogers.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My question is related to Cllr. Now, we're in this meeting tonight. It's taken us many years to get here, and Gareth, as the Chief Executive, explained a lot to me, because I felt disgruntled. You know, we've had a break for 5 years, June and myself. Of course, we're back now. The question I want to ask really is, and I can't find the report, there's a few other things I can't find in it. Cllr School, why wasn't the school designated to be built on Cllr? Now, that is big enough. I went there for 8 years. I also went to Merthyr. Now, why didn't they think, and don't tell me it cannot be done, because it was done in Cllr in Pant. I've sat on the governor there for years, and what they done in Pant was they part built it, and they built a new school on site, and they didn't have to move at all. So why move from, somebody can answer me now, why move from a Cllr, even thinking of the old way in Merthyr, or the Goidrecoid fields, in my opinion, had no need of it. You could have built on the site like it done in Cllr school in Pant. But the question being put to me today, and I haven't spoken to persons, but it's been there, is it a money cause to sell the school, to sell the two schools? I don't know. So my question is, why didn't we build on Cllr school?
Mr. Mayor, I'm sure the technical advisors will assist me here. The problem with Cllr school is clearly it's set out in the report. It's in a dilapidated state, and it does need repair and replacement. Doesn't need repair, actually needs replacement. First thing which was done, Tony, as part of the listening and engagement session that we had with the public, the former Cllr site, or the current Cllr site, was one of the sites that was put forward to the public. That was disregarded by the public, not only in regards to it's whilst it's in a very nice location, it hasn't got the space requirements for the current curriculum. The other issue we've got is that even if you could build on the current site, you would have to decant those pupils for a period of up to 2 years plus, because obviously you can't build on the site without demolishing it. You'd have to decant those young people to another location, and then obviously you would have to move them back in due course. The site was put forward to public consultation for consideration, and it was disregarded as well by the public. So hopefully that answers it. I'm sure there's a lot more technical arguments than what I put forward there, but it was looked at in detail together with, I think it was either another 7 sites which the council put forward, and with all due respect, the public also put forward some sites themselves for us to look at. And as we said within the report, it basically came down to the 2 sites which the public was supporting.
Councillor Skinner.
How much of the curriculum is currently PE, and how does this compare to how much physical activity would be lost by losing the field?
As I said earlier, it's 120 minutes. The expectation is there's 120 minutes per week that schools, that classes are meant to have to undertake a formal physical education. So one indoor, usually one indoor and one outdoor. The access to the outdoors should be continuous. As part of the foundation phase, you should have continuous access to the outdoors, and if you go into any school across the borough or across Wales, you should be seeing children learning outdoors as a natural part of their curriculum.
What I mean by the second part of the question was, how does it compare to physical activity that takes place on that field outside of school? So if you've got 120 hours of PE and you take away that field, how does it compare to what the physical activity that currently takes place?
The physical activity that takes place within the school day will be actually the learning activities, is teaching the children the skills. When you're looking at the activities that take place on the community field outside, they can still be the rugby, they can still be the soccer. Those would be and the children would still have the access for free play, on the community fields afterwards. But you're actually, the physical education curriculum is what's being taught by the teachers. I'm not sure I'm answering.
No, because I wondered whether there was a comparison. You mentioned about 120 hours, and I wondered whether that same attention had been given, 120 minutes, that same attention had been given to the amount of minutes or hours taken up on that field every week as part outside of school. That was the question, not necessarily in school, outside as part of the community.
No, because the community, that takes place outside school time anyway. So from 4:30, from 3:30, 4:30, whatever, that can be utilised whenever it's light and on the weekends. That wouldn't stop. That wouldn't stop. But we're still looking at that 120 minutes, or that hour per class. If we're looking at 7 classes, 7 or 8 classes, you're looking at that during the school day. What happens outside the school day would continue. You'd have the same.
The reason I asked the question is because obviously everything we do now is about tackling the health issues that we face as a borough, so rising levels of obesity, particularly with our young people. And my fear is that if you concentrate solely on what we provide just in school, you could potentially be missing the opportunities that are there for outside of school, in terms of, not just in terms of play, but actual structured sport that might be going on at the moment.
That under the proposal, you are not losing the community field. You're not losing use of the community field at all. There would still be that opportunity to take part. That's the expectation. If the build is on the Godrecoid site, the expectation is that the community would still have access to the site and would still be able to carry out their activities outside school.
Mr. Mayor, I know Jim wants to come in, and I can understand where Councillor Skinner is coming from. I think I just need to remind this council we're making a decision on a 21st century school for an education purpose of this authority. Whilst I understand you may wish to take into account outside activities, and again, there's been no assessment done of that, the amount of usage, etc., whilst the public obviously have given a view in regards to the usage of that. The only saving, the issue which this council has said within a report, if council decided to build on Vane and Penderyn, then we will take some of the playing field for outdoor play area and for access and for parking. If this council decided to put the school on the playing field, there will be a playing field left. And that's what I'll ask Jim to come in. Whatever people say in the back row, there will still be a playing field left. So the discussion you're having is, is it the size it is at the moment, or will it be half the size? Then Jim can pick that up, because there will be public open space there. We are not losing it. The perception that the whole lot will go is a fallacy. We will be replacing a playing field.
Okay, so if I understand correctly, what you're asking us to do is compare the amount of outdoor play activity that the school uses by comparison with the loss of what might be lost and felt by the community. Now, unless we actually undertook a detailed study on the number of hours that the field was used by the community and the actual physical area that the community uses, we can't do a direct comparison for you. Now, if you remember what I said earlier on, is that to an extent, some of the loss of the playing fields can be mitigated. We don't know how much because we don't have the data. It is likely that we cannot replace on a like-for-like basis all of the activity that is carried out on Godrecoid fields, but we don't know whether we need to, and we don't know whether it's going to be good enough, and we won't know unless we enter into discussions with the community. But we do know, to an extent, that loss can be mitigated.
Given the nature of tonight's meeting and the fact that it is a highly emotive issue, I just wonder why didn't we gather that data? Why didn't we speak to the community and gather that data?
That point of discussion has come up in all of the community consultation sessions, and it is difficult to arrive at any hard data in terms of area and frequency, because what you're in effect asking us to do is amount of space more or less in square meters per pupil per hour per week, for example, which is quite a complicated thing to deal with. So that hasn't been done.
And I think, you know, the difficulty, it is an emotive subject, and as I will reiterate, we are building a school here for our young people. The Chief Education Officer has given the advice in regards to how we deliver the curriculum in our schools. Okay, it's a matter for the council to decide where it wants to put this school, but in education terms, which is what you have to look after, as well as understand the public's view, but in education terms, which we are the statutory education authority, the education officer has given the view. In regards to the point that Jim has made, we're under an obligation, and I know the sites have been put forward, to replace these areas of land. Now, clearly, you know, there will be other areas of land which can be used, which are currently not used by the public, but we will have to satisfy that requirement to the fields in trust, because the fields in trust will want adequate replacement land, either of a similar nature or of a better nature to be put forward. So irrespective, as I keep saying, of which site goes forward, we will also have to satisfy the fields in trust to provide alternative replacement land for the use of the public.
Just one last question. You mentioned about the fact that in the past there have been schools built on that don't necessarily meet the 21st century standards. So with that in mind, and given the fact that also you've mentioned that both sites are viable, and you've identified two issues such as parking and the PE, what could we do to overcome those two issues?
In terms of parking, if we look again at the transport options appraisal, the preferable option is to use Godrecoid fields with a loss of some area for parking and vehicle access for staff and potentially for visitors. That is pretty much all. That, on the data we have at the moment, appears to be the best way of resolving any site access issues. What was the other one, sorry?
It was around the PE, but I think that's already been answered, but it was just part of my original question. I suppose what you're saying is there are solutions then. There are problems, but there's equally solutions.
Yes, I think that has never been in doubt, that the Vaynor and Penderian site can be built on. The question really is the extent to which one recognises there are compromises present on the Vaynor and Penderian site, and to what extent the council is prepared to either overlook or accept that some of those compromises are worthwhile for the community. So yes, it's what sort of school do you want to buy for your money? Do you want to buy a Ford Fiesta, or do you want to buy a, say for the sake of argument, a Mercedes? Now you choose what you want to buy based on an overall assessment.
Any further questions, Councillor Skinner? No? Councillor Amos.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Like Councillor Clive Jones, I've got a few to ask, actually. Firstly, page 2 of the report, and it's 2.3, I think. It's about the fields in trust. Now, when we turn to page 18 of the report, I think it is. Sorry to keep moving around. What concerns me a little bit here is 4.46 are the words, should the approval of fields in trust be necessary to proceed with the development of a replacement school. And at 4.48 it said they're likely to be surplus, not definitely, and should the sites not be required. Now to me that means we're waiting for the these National Fields Organisation to say yay or nay, and it's also said that we might have land for them or we might not. Now, was this put to residents when this went out to consultation, that there was a question mark over whether we could satisfy this important request? And my second, well, it's a related question, is what happens if we can't? If we put a field on, if we put a school on that field and we find out we can't satisfy it, then we can have to pull it down?
Mr Mayor, the position is, as it said in the report, we're obliged to provide replacement land. So wherever the school goes, whether it be Vaynor and Penderian site or whether it goes on Cllr site, whatever land is taken out of the Fields in Trust deed of dedication, and there will be quantities of land having to be taken because it will not be available for public use, then we are required by the deed of dedication to provide replacement land of equivalent or better quality than the land we've taken. So the report, as sets out in the recommendation, there are currently 2 pieces of land we can actually offer. Clearly, there's a view there isn't any replacement land. That's even a far worse position if there's no replacement land, because we will not get the consent of the Fields in Trust. And if we don't get the consent of Fields in Trust, then nothing gets built. So the reality is, we, in the report, as you said, in one of the recommendations, which Councillor Barry's moved, we are currently offering up to the Fields in Trust the Teddington's Field.
Gentlemen, can we remind you what we said at the outset? You are entitled to be here, but you can't disrupt the debate.
We're offering up the Teddington's Field because it's within this council's ownership, and the other piece of land we're offering up, even though it's obviously there's a lease on, is the Black Patch. Now, the issue, I think people need to listen to what's being said here. If the Fields in Trust do not accept that, then you don't get a school. Okay? There is no school in Cefn whatsoever. Okay? So it's okay to say, you know, the joviality, it's not good enough, etc., etc. There will be no school. Okay? Now, if that's the wish of the public, then so be it. But we are required by law, by this deed, and everyone knows about it, to provide replacement land, okay, which the Fields in Trust have to agree. If they don't agree, picking up your point, Councillor Amos, then it's still no school, because they need to agree. The Fields in Trust need to agree. And that's why there's an urgency in this matter to move this matter forward in regards to this council offering up Teddingson's Field and it offering up the Black Patch in regards to meeting this requirement. If there isn't any other land, then everyone has thwarted this deed.
Thank you, Gareth. Can I come back on your answer there? From what I understand, I think you touched on it yourself, that there is a lease on, I'm not familiar with the area, but the Black Patch. And I understand that part of that area there suffers from floods. Now, the answer to your problems, I would have thought, and to get away from having to get anything done with the national fields, is not to build the school on the field. We have no problem then with the National Field Trust, do we?
I think, with all respect, people are not hearing what I'm saying. Whether you build on Vain Benderin or whether you build on Goitracoid, you will take part of the field. It's been demonstrated here by the officers. Councillor Skinner has just asked a question in regards to car parking, access, the land that will be required for outdoor play. That land will be taken from the Fields and Trust. So it's not a like for like, Julian. It's not build a school on Vain and Penderyn site and leave the field. It's not viable if you do that. You have to put in mitigation, and again the highways engineers raised it in regards to the highway access to make this Vain and Penderyn site stack up in that terms. You've heard that the site is not big enough, the Vain and Penderyn site, for parking. That's both school teacher parking or parking for visitors to the site. We've heard that, you know, there will be 100 traffic movements there in regards to people moving back and forwards. We heard there will be 27 teachers, support staff. 27 people will have to park somewhere. That allocation as part of the process will be on the field. So we will have to take part of the land.
Okay, my second question is page 4. 313, and it's the whole raft of stuff there that is necessitated a second consultation since 2011. It's a simple question to this one, is all of these things are listed, are they material changes that affect what we can do? And if they're not, why did we go out to a second consultation?
Well, the answer is 313. The decision was made over 5 years ago when we went out to consultation. As I've said in 313, it sets out all the pieces of legislation that came into effect from 2011. Those are all listed within the report. So, you know, clearly that sets out that, and then again in 314 there's also case law that requires us to go back out in regards to you know, a decision which has been outstanding for so long, and that's covered in 314, Councillor Amos.
Basically what I said is that all this stuff that's quoted there, do they mean, are they a real material difference? Will any of those things stop us building a school on the field? In which case, why did we go out? If we were able to carry forward what was already being agreed by the community, why do we go out again? If none of this affects our ability to build the school. I appreciate what you're saying, that there are these different regulations and BREEAM requirements, but if they don't make any difference, then why did we go out to consultation yet again? I don't quite understand that. I appreciate that all of this has come in, but that's the question. Do they really affect what we can do?
Yes.
haven't finished yet, I don't think. Yeah, it's something that it was something that Councillor Clive Jones mentioned. It was page 4. I think it was page 4. It was about the 20th century schools. Appreciate the point that was made about it being that one school could meet the standards and the other one couldn't. The fact that the one couldn't, i.e. the one on the Vayner of Merthyr site, how does that impact upon the funding we get from Welsh Government, given that it's a 20th century schools programme, and why wasn't that fact communicated to the community in the consultation? I don't believe it was, because if it was a non-starter, well, you know, why go with it in the beginning?
I believe that we answered that. Councillor Barry asked that earlier on. We do not. There is no requirement to go to consult with Welsh Government as to where we build a site. The only Welsh Government type body that we consult with are Eston, the Inspectorate, and they actually came back and said that both sites were viable. We've had the money through as Band B. The strategic plans have gone in. They know what we're looking to do, so there was no consultation, as we explained earlier to Councillor Barry.
Okay, thank you. That's all my questions.
Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've got a few questions, but can I ask the Chief Officer, who's just said about the satisfying the field of trust between both sites? But you've got to admit there's a vastly different amount of land required to satisfy the field of trust in both sites, which could be, if it's picked on the Vayner Merthyr, there's a vast amount of different size of land required to satisfy the field than if it was picked on the Goy field.
The answer to that is yes. You know, we fully accept that whichever site council approves this evening, then, you know, clearly one site requires a lot less land to be replaced than the other. So if you choose, if the preferred location for the school is Vayner Merthyr, then a lot less of the field is required to be replaced. If you choose Goy, then a lot more will be replaced. Clearly, you know, the indication in regards to moving this forward is we need to identify as a council what those land on offer would be, which we've done within the report, and those negotiations would take place with effect following decision tonight. Whichever way it goes, we will be making contact with the Fields Interest tomorrow, because again, time is of the essence here. Whichever site we build upon, we have to get their consent.
Thanks, Mayor. Two more questions. As part of the consultation, can you confirm what percentage of all respondents questioned were in favour of building on the Vayner Merthyr site?
83%, Councillor Barrett. Sorry, 83%.
Last for now. And what about actual residents who were questioned? What was the overall percentage in favour of building on the Vayner Merthyr site?
94%, Councillor Barrett.
Councillor Isaac.
Yeah, thank you. I know it's been touched on once or twice, but I take you to page 16. Technical build, design and build. And one of the disadvantages of Vayner and Penderyn School, site area fails to meet the Education School Premises Regulations 1999. So if it does, why was this area considered at the start? Secondly, it's a planning question. If it fails to meet the school premises regulations, would there be a planning problem? And I'll come back with my third question after.
As has been discussed earlier on, there are numerous examples of schools that have been built on sites, as you've said earlier on, that are deemed to be too small. Estin haven't commented adversely on that. So from a point of view of whether it's viable or not, it's clearly viable.
With reference to your second part of your question, the education school premises regs are not a material planning consideration per se. When the planning application is submitted, we'll be consulting with various internal departments, and then we'll consider all those responses that we receive as part of making the recommendation on the application.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just said that the education school regulations are not a material planning consideration per se. Regardless of that, when the planning application is submitted, we'll consult with all relevant internal departments. Any comments we receive will be factored into the recommendation that we make to planning committee.
And my third question is, should the playing fields be built on, would consideration be given to the Merthyr and Penderyn site to turn that into green space instead?
I think, as I indicated, I think that would be going out to public consultation. So if the view of the public was that should be looked at as part of the proposal, then I'm sure that's what this administration would want, is that we would look at that as part of the proposal. There's been no decision made in regards to Merthyr and Penderyn, whether it's built on or not in regards to the school. But if Goedricoi did go ahead, then we would go out to the public to see what would be acceptable on that site.
Councillor Clive Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have in front of me a copy of the special governing body meeting at Cllr Primary School dated the 3rd of July 2017, because the minutes of any governing body is publicly available. And having read that, it says on the second page, after the then Chief Education Officer updated the governing body on the preferred site for the new school, that she withdrew, and both Councillor Mitten and Councillor Barrett withdrew. Then the governors discussed both sites and agreed to hold a secret ballot and to decide which is the preferred site of the governing body. And on my mathematics, there were 10 governors still left there. As this is not in the overarching report, what was the outcome of that ballot from the governing body?
I don't know. I wasn't the Chief Education Officer at the time, so I wouldn't, I wasn't part of that. But I believe the current chair of governors is at the back. Are they? Is she?
This lady has no partner, Miss. I've had the answer to my question, albeit from a member of the public.
Any more questions, Clive? No. Councillor Chris Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to come back to Sue, Chief Education Officer. You answered, in terms of safeguarding, you answered the first part of my question when you said about the ratios. In your report on page 9 on the disadvantage of Merthyr and Penderyn, you say the disadvantages of the Merthyr and Penderyn site, that a higher staff to pupil ratio will be a safeguarding requirement. I'm struggling with that as it being a strength really, or its merit to putting forward advantages and disadvantages on the grounds that shouldn't high ratios already be a requirement in any event for any off-site activity as an existing measure to safeguard all children in all of our schools. I'm in the business of safeguarding as a registered and qualified social worker, so I'm not sure how that can stack up. Is it being a requirement for it to be any higher at Merthyr and Penderyn than they should be as a safeguarding requirement in any of our schools for any of our children?
I totally agree with you. The safeguarding is the highest priority. Why it's a disadvantage is because if you build on the Vane and Penderyn site, you have to actually walk the children off-site to get to the Godrecoid site. If you build on the Godrecoid site, you wouldn't have to walk the children off-site, and that is a disadvantage because you're using other members of staff to walk them to the Vane and to walk them to the Godrecoid site. If it was on one site, you wouldn't need that ratio.
No. Sorry. I did say at the beginning of the meeting the general public are not allowed to take part in the debate. Councillor Chris Davis, answer your question.
I do accept that, and you know, whilst I recognise, I just think it's not a strength in just singling it out in relation to disadvantage in relation to the Vane and Penderyn site, because as the lady in the public gallery did allude to, we're encouraging young people, children, to be looking at physical activity. There are a number of schools across the borough that are doing walk-in buses to school, you know, so consideration there with regards to safeguarding. I just, you know, this is about the safeguarding and appropriate supervision of children, and we have an LEA recommended policy on off-site activities that should provide for the appropriate ratios and supervision of children. I'm not sure how I can, you know, see it as a strength as a disadvantage.
You're talking about a different issue. The reason it becomes a disadvantage with the Vane and Penderyn, if you have a class that is waiting to go to physical activity, be one teacher actually going outside to deliver that physical education, and your other staff, your LS, your learning support assistants, whatever, are deployed across the school to do other activities, and that they're employed to work with other children. By actually needing to use those members of staff to walk the children to Godrecoid because it is a safeguarding issue, you would have taken them away from actually supporting other children. I agree, they have to be there because it's a safeguarding issue, but it's a disadvantage because you're taking them away from supporting other children and possibly carrying out interventions or other activities.
With respect, I think you contradict yourself, because in response to Councillor Jones's question, when he asked you about staff to pupil ratios, you said there would be one member of staff to 10 pupils of a certain age. I'm assuming that's the older age, and then one for the primary and secondary, primary foundation phase and junior phase. You talk of a ratio of 1 to 10 and 1 to 15. So those staff would have to go with those pupils in any event.
Not if the school was built on the Godrecoid site. It's only because you're actually taking them off the main school site in Vane and Penderyn. You're walking them down a public highway to get to the Godrecoid site. If it was built on one site, you wouldn't need that ratio of pupils, of staff to pupil ratio. You need the ratio of staff to pupils because you're taking them from one site down a public highway to the other site.
Councillor Lewis.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The Equality Impact Assessment on page 19 of the report refers that the council will host a learning resource space for up to 15 stage 2 pupils with identified additional needs within the new school. Irrespective of the chosen site, can that still be provided?
Yes, that will be planned. That is being planned in.
Councillor Amos.
Yes, as someone, well, in another incarnation, when I worked in the Welsh Assembly, for my sins, I quite often did consultations, and all members ought to remember that a consultation is what it says it is. It's not a referendum. But could I ask Kerry, what we've got is an 84% figure. I work it out as 426 out of 514. You say that was of the questionnaires returned. Could I just ask, to make these figures meaningful, what was the response rate to the consultation? I say this because I understand the electorate of Kevin is something like 2,785. So to know how many people actually took the trouble to respond would be interesting for members. That's all I'd like to add. But I would like another unrelated question.
sorry, just to clarify, so you're asking what residents, Councillor Amos, you?
Yeah, well, all I'm asking is that the questionnaires or whatever you sent out in whatever format, how many people actually residents, how many actually responded, rather than your figure is an 84% of those who actually came back. A more meaningful figure would be what percentage voted for the Vaynor and Penderian site out of the ones that you actually sent out.
Sorry, Councillor Amos. I just if I refer you to page 32 of the report and the part of the Cllr report at the top under 221 is residents 213 respondents. And 200 of those favoured Vaynor. If you want me to quickly try and work out the percentage out to the electorate, I can.
Fine, thank you, Ellis. That's fine. That's fine. The other question was something that was touched on earlier on. I promise you this is my last. You said that I think it was Gareth said that you assured the community that basically if it was built on the field, they would have, as I understood you to say, the, I suppose, grassed over old Vaynor and Penderian site. The question is, they have at the moment a very large community field, and I've seen the field. Will they have a similar facility on the Vaynor and Penderian site, or as I would hazard a guess, will it be considerably smaller?
I can't answer that because we've not been out to public consultation on the Vaynor and Penderian site, because clearly once we have a decision this evening, whichever site goes forward, if Cllr did go forward, which currently isn't the motion, then if that did go forward, then we would go to public consultation in regards to the Vaynor and Penderian site for its future use. The issue, and again, I've just picked it up previously, we have to provide alternative replacement land, however much that is in regards to both schemes we have to replace. Clearly, we would have to do that before we ever get to building the school anyway. And then it would be an addition in regards to what we do with the Vaynor and Penderian site if that wasn't built upon. So it's not a straight swap for one for the other, Julian. But we haven't got that position yet because we haven't got a decision.
You don't know how. All I'm asking for is a comparison. I don't see how that relates to a consultation. All I'm asking is an indication in terms of broad dimensions. I'm not asking for you know, yards, feet and inches. I'm showing my time by saying that. But in comparison to the one areas. Now, I would suggest that the old Vaynor school site is considerably smaller than the present field. So therefore, it's not like for like, is it? And that, to my way of thinking, that does not need a consultation to answer that question. You know, I could probably go up there and have a look at the old school site and took a look at the field and find out exactly. It's not a matter for consultation. It's simply knowing what they are. That was my question. I don't quite follow your answer.
I think if you look at it logically then, if the Vaynor and Penderian site isn't big enough currently for a school, and you have to put alternative use of some other land in as well to make it feasible, then clearly if you're building a brand new school on the Cllr site, then it isn't big enough. So the answer to your question is, the Vaynor and Penderian site, should it be used exclusively for a playing field, the likelihood is it would not be big enough as a replacement. But that proposal isn't before the council because we have to replace it before we even get there.
Do we have any further questions? Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Chair. I've driven and walked around the streets near the Vayner Pendarian site. I noticed that many of the areas don't have footpaths, no space to construct any. If you add to this the current resident parking issues, and then you're going to have many primary aged pupils and parents who will be walking from all directions to and from the school. Also, pupils being driven to school. I see that as a problem. Are you confident that improvements could be made to make the access from the whole area to the school reasonably safe?
Well, there are clearly constraints on the highway around the existing site, and hence why the outcome of the appraisal that was undertaken favours building on the playing field site. There are potential opportunities in terms of providing some footways, but these might involve things like CPO of land, gardens, for example, taking strips of land to provide footways. One of the things that we observed when we undertook our site visits was that there's a lot of obstructions as well, not just parked cars, but because of the nature of houses, there's a lot of wheelie bins and other obstructions on the footways where they exist. And in terms of access by things like push chairs, it is problematic in terms of lack of drop curbs and discontinuous footways.
My next question relates around option A8. If that was chosen, and we've got it on page 14, where is the drop-off point for that option?
The drop-off point would be on the playing field site. There would be a park and stride facility, car park provided on the playing fields, and then pupils would be required to walk up Godrecoid Road and cross into the school site. A suitable crossing facility would need to be identified. That may need to be supervised by staff, or you might have a crossing patrol that would need to be deployed. Those details would need to be worked out. Currently there's no continuous footway linking the playing fields up to the former school site, and therefore there would be a requirement to narrow that road to enable a continuous footway to be provided.
Thank you for that. Still a bit of a considerable walk in our climate, but then how would you ensure that parents didn't use other routes to access the school?
Yeah, I mean, it's a valid question. We would be providing a formal facility, but clearly sort of on a day when there's inclement weather, it's going to be very difficult to enforce the park and stride in terms of if parents want to drop off closer to the site or park up on surrounding roads, then that creates potential issues of congestion. I mean, Pontycapel Road is a very narrow road. It only takes an ambulance parked outside someone's house or a courier to suddenly block that access. So for option A8, there are definitely potential constraints in relation to vehicular traffic flow, which are much more severe than with options relating to the playing field site.
Thank you for that, and that would then bring me back to my original point about how could improvements be made to the whole area, because obviously people will be walking to the school from all areas around.
Sorry.
Should the school be built on the Vayner Pendarian site? Could the play area within the school meet the current Welsh Government guidelines? I know parts of the questions have been answered before, but I'd just like it clarified.
There will be a shortfall of space. Subsequent testing exercises have shown that to an extent we can put a play area on the Vayner and Pendarian site. It still leaves us with a shortfall it's a decision that's going to have to be accepted by council.
Thank you very much for that. And my last question is confirmation of what's been said already, really. So, should the Godricoid site be chosen, would a full-size rugby field still be available for community use? Full size.
From the information we have at the moment, it is clear that we appear to be able to accommodate a pitch of the same size that is currently a formal rugby pitch that is the same size as is currently used. However, in all of the consultation, the community has stressed that there is use of more than just one large contiguous rugby pitch. For mini rugby tournaments, for example, a lot of the area surrounding the pitch is also used. Some of that can be potentially mitigated elsewhere, but that comes back to the points that we discussed earlier on. We don't know how much we would need to provide, and we don't know whether it would be deemed to be acceptable to the community, the rugby club, by anybody. That would need an exercise working with the community to try and work out the best way of mitigating any land lost.
My question really was about, and you did answer it, even with the school on site, the field that is currently there could be a field of the same size could be on site.
Only insofar as a formal rugby pitch, that's all we get. We'd also get some dog walking areas and some additional areas, yes, but there would be a net loss of space in the immediate vicinity.
Councillor Geraint Thomas.
Just some for clarity on the safety issues, Neil. The pupils from Cllr currently go to Godricoid for certain days. How do they get there?
I think that's something I would refer to education.
As far as I understand it, they only use it for sports facilities one day a year, and then they actually, if they actually walk down, because they would have the number of building, the safeguarding issue. There would be the number of staff, because all of the children would be going down for sports day. So, one day a year.
So that's down the high street, across Pontycapel Road, and then down onto the playing field, yeah?
I don't know the route, Councillor Thomas.
Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Go back to the question about access and walking. Would you agree that Merthyr got more opportunity for people to walk and have access into that site than Godricoid? That's my first question. The second question is, how are they going to walk to the Godricoid site? Obviously, they will use... Sorry, I'll leave you on.
In terms of the former school site, as has already been picked up on one of the questions previously, currently the provision of footways is pretty poor within the highway, at present, and there are limited opportunities to improve that. I mean, we'd be looking to identify some safe routes and focus on those areas, but there are risks associated with that. For example, I've mentioned CPOs maybe need to be looked at in order to provide footways. There is a risk, obviously, in terms of perceptions of road safety, that if people don't feel safe, or parents don't feel that their children have safe access, then there's potential that they won't use those modes, and there might be a propensity for people to travel by car instead of walking, which obviously is contrary to what we're trying to encourage. In terms of getting to the former playing field site, down High Street and then at the Gwyn roundabout, there is continuous footway access on both sides of the street through to the playing field site. and that could be continued within the site to provide a continuous footway.
Obviously, you just said now it's continuous footwell. How do they get into Helakai? There's a 9-metre gap in the pavement on the right-hand side where you turn in into the Mysa side and then you turn into the Helakai. So there's no, you can't see the pavement on both sides. There's a gap there already.
There is a continuous footpath route from the roundabout through into the playing field site.
Yeah. Sorry, well, see, we disagree in that. Going back to the argument about the size of the playing field, and also regarding what's there now or what can be used there now, and which can't be used in the proposal, what happens to cricket? How is cricket going to be played on that field with the prospects of a school right next to the field?
In terms of continuous footpath, the point is that you've got a crossroads. Is that yeah, but there is a footpath option of getting there. Obviously, you do have to cross the highway, but on some of the other sites, there's not a continuous footway. You're walking on road with traffic.
Can I go back to my last question now, Jim? Is about you. I got to have you, Jim, because I will let you know all night. You just said about the size of the field. Have you got the details of the size that is suitable or maybe left there?
Yes, when we looked at all of the different options for the sites, we did do a calculation of the indicative area of the Godricoid field site, and we did a comparative calculation of the area of Vaynor Penderyn, for example. Those areas were actually shown on a number of the drawings that we presented at the consultation exercises, together with an indicated percentage shortfall or otherwise. I don't have all of those drawings to hand at the moment, but from memory, the Godricoid field site was something like around 23,000 square metres. The Vaynor and Penderyn site is something like around 8.5, if I'm not mistaken. We would be proposing to take approximately half, slightly more than half, was what the initial site analysis looked at. It's an arbitrary figure because until the site layout is designed in detail, we won't actually know how much space we're going to take. It's also the percentage shortfall. Also, the percentage shortfall calculations are also not necessarily accurate, because if you look at the area of a Godricoid field site, not every single square metre of that is actually used. Particularly, generally, it's the centre portion of all kind of playing fields used. Nobody ever uses the areas right the way around the boundaries for play as such. So there's an element of uncertainty about that, but certainly from the initial exercises we looked at, we were able to maintain both a full-size rugby pitch of the same size that is at the moment, plus some additional space around the pavilion, plus additional space around the perimeter of the site for dog walkers. And that was based on taking a little bit more than 50% of the field site.
Obviously, you haven't been there on a Sunday morning to see how much land is used on a Sunday morning. I will question your figures for the size of the rugby field now, because the size of the rugby field now there is quite large. And the drawings that you showed me in the past, or the thing, are much, much smaller than that field.
With the greatest respect, I don't quite think that's correct. I don't think we'd have made that bigger mistake, because it's an obvious thing to point out. What we did is we overlaid the aerial photography on top of the Ordnance Survey map, and we took the rectangle size that corresponded with the current rugby pitch and we basically moved it and twisted it. So we've taken the same thing, and we've actually looked by comparison at the WRU rugby pitch sizes that are recommended, and it's the size of the pitch that we are able to accommodate is something like around 94 metres long, and I forget the width. Cricket is something we haven't looked at. Some of the community have mentioned it in the consultation exercises, but one of the community also in the consultation exercises quite pointedly indicated that nobody's actually played cricket on that space formally for some time. Now, I can't vouch for that, but all I can say is that we haven't considered cricket, to be quite honest.
Councillor Isaac.
Yes, thank you. When you were answering the question of the footpaths around the area, you happened to mention or say a CPO. Can you explain what a CPO is? I obviously know what it is. And secondly, where would the money come for these CPOs?
CPO means compulsory purchase order. It's where if this council has a statutory purpose, namely to build a school, and land is required for that statutory purpose, and it is in third party's ownership, then this council can make or resolve to make a CPO to compulsorily acquire that land from that owner. There's no guarantee that the CPO will be confirmed, because if people object to the CPO, then it will go to a public inquiry. It is an issue, given it has been raised, if in order to make the Vaynor and Penderian site feasible to deliver the highway safety issues, and we are required to make a CPO, then to get a confirmed CPO without any objections will normally take 9 months. If there are objections, then it will be 18 months. I think the other issue is that this council hasn't allocated any land in regards to its compulsory acquisition at this moment. And again, if we go through that process and it needs to be acquired to make this land feasible, then there will be a formal statutory consultation. We haven't told the landowners clearly. If there are landowners affected, and I think mention was made about gardens, etc., then running a CPO early on may make it unaffordable, because not only do you have to make compensation payments, you also have to make accommodation works, etc., It's just an added cost. So, we've got a finite amount of money here. As I've said, we make the decision tonight, and whatever comes out of it will have to come out of it. If there is a CPO required, then we will have to deal with that, and then we will come back to council accordingly.
Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've listened all evening, and we keep getting the repetitive message: both sites are viable for this school. The national curriculum can be delivered on both sites through whichever one is selected. However, what's missing, a large element is missing in this report, and we've heard reports of the sizes of the pitches and the dimensions and whatever that can be provided. But why hasn't a community impact assessment been done on the current users of the fields that are in place?
Know the answer to it. I think the issue for us is, again, we are building a school. That's what we're building. We fully appreciate what the public, we fully understand what the public needs are, or what they actually want, but we're building a school for this authority and its young people. That's the requirement we're supposed to look at. the officers have looked at that in regards to what's the best solution putting it forward. I fully engage with what you said, they're both viable, because people are playing on that viable word. It means they're capable of being delivered. They are capable of being delivered, subject to some compromises. We've heard what those compromises are. If the compromise is to put it on Vane and Penderyn, then we have to utilise the playing field site for outdoor use. It meets the curriculum, but as the Chief Education Officer said, there will be an additional cost to the school, there will be additional safeguarding issues, etc., etc., because they will be on a split site. Picking up Councillor Davis's point, it's because it's on a split site. If you put it on Goetre-Coed, then there will be one site. The issue is, in regards to school provision, that's what this authority is looking at. In regards to what the public want the playing fields untouched in reality, okay, because it is only the green space in the village. We as an authority have got a very difficult decision to make. The consultation picked up that they wanted on the Vane and Penderyn site. The 200 residents wanted it on the Vane and Penderyn site. The 17 others wanted it elsewhere. It's what we can do. We are building a 21st century school. We are, as officers, proposing to you that that can be built in its best location on the site, providing a single site for the education of our young people. If this council wishes to take the decision to put it on a split site and remain the playing field for the community, then that's a decision of this council, and that's what we as officers will deliver.
But as a consideration, you say that we might be able to replace the parts of the field that are taken. What about the risk assessment of those areas then that you're going to displace the current users of the field? What about the risk to those people then who go out on the weekends and use those areas? There's no consideration being given to that at all. There's been no study done on how many users, how many groups, how many rugby teams, how many football teams, cricket teams, etc., etc. That information should have been part of the consideration of this report.
I can't argue with you. Yeah, we'll have to beg to differ on it. We're building a school here for our young people. Okay, that's what we're building. The issue around safeguarding, what about other people going to other fields? Well, we're looking at the safeguarding of our young people at a location which is one, either at Vane and Penderyn and the Associated Place or the other site. In regards to the other sites, Fields in Trust will look at that. Okay, and the reality is we're building a primary school here for young people between the age of 3 and 11. That's what we're building here. We're not building a secondary school for 11 to 16 or 11 to 18. We're looking at the most youngest in this authority. So we could do all the surveys which you say, Councillor Brown, if there is an amendment to this, if you wish to say go out and consult, then that's what we will do. But ultimately, the likelihood is that the determination by this professional officer team, irrespective of what the public want, in regards to education of our young people in this county borough, is that there is a preferred location. It's a matter for this council if you want to keep the playing fields and the school, wherever that may go.
Any further questions, Councillor Brown? No. Do we have any other questions? Okay. Okay, that is now the end of questions. So thank you very much for everybody who's participated. I do appreciate this has been going on for some time. So I'm going to recommend we have a comfort break, and then we'll go on to, if everybody could be back in chamber by 1:45, and then we'll go straight on to comments.
Can I just be clear to members that the meeting will resume at 1:45. If you are not present, then you won't be able to vote. So please be back at 1:45.
Right, can I have everybody's attention, please? The meeting's now starting again, please. Thank you, everybody. Just to make an announcement, we have made arrangements for the multi-storey car park to stay open until 9 o'clock tonight, so there's not a huge risk at this point. Okay, so next part of this is comments. So I understand we got comments coming from Shiraj. Go. Big list.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Okay, Sue, our Chief Learning Officer, has confirmed that whilst the local authority were not required to consult with Welsh Government, they did have to consult with our inspectorate, Estyn. Estyn is responsible for the inspection of all of our schools across Wales. They look for high quality and high standards. I'm confident that Estyn would have fully considered the advantages and disadvantages of both proposed sites in connection with the 21st Century School agenda. Yet, in the professional opinion of Estyn, there was no preferred site put forward. Estyn left the choice of the sites up to this council to take into consideration the views of local residents, which I think we need to do this evening.
Councillor Coburn.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. For the many, not the few, we're here. They're strong and powerful words, but is there any meaning behind them? At heart, I'm a Labour supporter, and I have been my whole life. So why did I stand as an independent candidate in May's elections? Because Labour claim to be for the many, not the few, but it became clear to me that they weren't listening. They were taking decisions that were in the best interest of the Labour Party, not in the interest of local residents. So that's why I stood as an independent candidate, and that's the reason why thousands of disillusioned Labour supporters across the borough voted for independent candidates. We were listening, Labour weren't, and that's the reason they lost the election. They just weren't listening. Now, this is a very comprehensive report. Thanks to everyone involved in producing it. It was a lot of work and effort gone into it. We certainly can't say we haven't been given sufficient information. I read it in great detail. It was a really fun-filled Sunday, that was. But it seems to me that both sites are equally suitable, apart from the one overwhelming factor. The public consultation and 83% of residents preferring the VMP site. Why do we go through such a long and costly process if we're not going to listen to the views of 83% of the people? Was the consultation a meaning exercise or just a token gesture? Are we going to listen to or ignore the views of 83% of the people? Now, in the past, I've sat here in this chamber and I've listened to Councillor Amos arguing passionately about the importance of consultation and the need to listen to people. Now, they are wise words from an experienced councillor, and I, for one, intend to follow his advice. And the overwhelming majority of residents have spoken loud and clear, and I've listened, and I hope all the other councillors are listening as well. There may be members here tonight who think that people have short memories, and by the next election they'll have forgotten who listened to them and who didn't. Well, in my experience, people have got long memories. I'm really pleased that tonight in the chamber, in front of all the members, in front of the gallery, in front of the press, we get to see which councillors listen to the public and which don't, and who really represents the views of the many, not the few. Thank you.
Councillor Tony Rogers.
Can I just say that Kevin Coyd is my hometown. I was born in Kevin Coyd in 17 Bryn Taf, and I see a lot of faces here tonight, I know. The problem we had in Kevin Coyd, when you grew up, you couldn't go on the field. Now, I can remember in the 50s, late 50s, watching the Kevin Rugby with that club there. Great players, Di Chambers, Clive Norgrove, Arthur Thomas, should have played for Wales. Next time we could go on the field was 1961. Listen to this, the facts, listen to this, from here. 1961 we went on the next. There's a colleague of mine up there, Alan Howells, in the same team as me, I captained the team there. My uncle, Noel, then was a district councillor, got permission for us. And a great man, the late great Mr. Rupert Bush, provided the post and the painting, and we used to slot them in front of the rugby post there, and we'd play our game in Kevin. Prior to that, we played up in the Legion in Penyard. Never lost a game, by the way, but a great season. Secondly to that, then, later on, when they decided that, just before that actually, it was a team in Kevin Coyd, listen to this, and all the area we had there, there was a team in Kevin Coyd, a great football inside, let me tell you. They played up on a field up in a farm in Darren. They had to go up there to play football. Great players. I won't mention them, you know them all. Clive Owen, Ivor Broom, people. I'm born and bred there, look. I know what I'm talking about. We could not play in our own area. Now you've got a community field there, which is second to none. Now when I went up this field, I think it was I stopped at the Assembly 2011. Councillor Amos and myself went there. I saw, must be 200 people there. Hot dogs selling, all families there, lovely it was. I thought, what a sight to see it. But we were debarred from our own field in Kevin Coyd. We had nowhere to go. You couldn't play. The Black Patch hadn't been done. I sat on the first youth committee for the Black Patch. No, I was Architect Black Patch was. So what I'm saying is, what you've got this community field, and it is a community field, protect it. Don't hand it over the education, because we've just lost an annex in Pant, which we raised money for. They've taken it over. Also, as a private company in there, preschool they're doing, making a fortune. And we worked hard. I'm chairman and secretary of the Pant Community Group here. So what you got, you keep. Don't go cap and hand. And these problems I've heard tonight, I haven't heard very good answers, to be honest. And these problems I've heard tonight are not insurmountable. Because I went away to Penderyn after, there must be 600 pupils there. Cllr we'll go anywhere. There's no problems. It can be done. But I would say this, and it's going to be decided tonight, to the Chief Executive saying there, keep your community field, don't give it up, because next year you'll notice on there, Education Department can't use it only so-and-so days. Keep the rugby up. Don't give them an inch, because I don't trust them. I tell you straight, I don't. We keep your community field in Kevin Coyd because we suffered through it. We couldn't have our own field there. We had to go anywhere. I played in a pandy for how many years? I don't know. You know, that's, come and have a cut, get on the field. Kill yourself, that was. So, Kevin Coyd, you keep your community field. I know what I'm backing tonight. I want that as a community field for the rest of the days for the people and children of Kevin Coyd.
Councillor Amos.
Well, how do I follow that, really? Difficult, isn't it? Well, we've heard a lot tonight, and I do congratulate the officers for the reports they've given. A lot of work gone into them. Congratulate Gareth there for his comments. But in the reports, really, they consist, from what I can see, of 4 areas. There's the education, and cases being made out to put it on the field. Traffic, engineering, it all goes on the field. But the other component of these reports is what the community has said. In Dowlais, as Tony has hinted at, we've lost our facilities. We used to have a field. We used to hold fetes and fairs and carnivals on it. I congratulate the leader of the council. Never thought you'd hear me say that, but what he has tried to do is be open and transparent, and he has succeeded in that. I applaud him on that. It's the public that counts, and they have spoken with a loud voice. And for my part, I agree with my colleague here, Tony Rogers. As far as I'm concerned, the school goes on the Merthyr and Penderyn site, and the community use the field, and it stays a community field. Thank you all for coming.
Councillor Chris Barry.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. And I start off by saying, Mr Mayor, thank God I didn't come into politics to be popular, because I'm going to fail dismally tonight. Mr Mayor, this really is a straightforward report as far as I'm concerned. with all the information and evidence leading to only one logical outcome. Anyone reading the report without any predetermined viewpoint can only come to the conclusion that the Goedrecoed site is the only acceptable location for the new school. It's beyond me why that report actually tells us that the professional officer's advice on recommendation that the school goes on this site, yet somebody somewhere has made the decision to remove this recommendation from the report. This made the report ask councillors to make an informed decision, and I only hope that all councillors do that and make a decision based on fact and evidence rather than one based on emotion. May I fully accept that the result of the public consultations overwhelmingly in favour of the not the playing field site. This was always going to be the case, anywhere but the fields. I have to say, Mr Mayor, I, in common with probably most other councillors, have received quite a number of emails over the last few days of residents, and I have to say they're all measured, polite and well presented, and that's not always the case, I can assure you. I thank those who did write to me, and whilst I will not be reflecting their views and disagree with them, I certainly respect that they hold those views. Mr Mayor, what I find a little bit puzzling is, whilst the consultation was referenced quite comprehensively in the report before us tonight, what isn't mentioned anywhere in the main body of the report is the fact that, as part of the process, the head teacher and the staff of the school strongly favour the Goedrecoed site, as do the school governing body. As the governing body stated in the response, educational requirements must be the priority. Mr Mayor, it's not very long since the Labour administration brought this council's education services out of special measures. We did this by making tough decisions which were not always universally popular. This Labour group is quite prepared to continue to do the right thing for our greatest assets, our children. We will not sell them short. We need to give the children the very best facilities that we can. A school fit for the 21st century, not a build on an inferior site that does not meet the required standards for 21st century school. They deserve far better than that. Mayor, section 4.3 of the report tells us the advice of the professional officers is overwhelmingly for the playing field site. The education recommendation, due to the ability to deliver a 21st century provision on one site which is sustainable for the needs of 21st century learners. Engineering and transport. The options appraisal demonstrated all the shortlisted access egress options relating to the playing field site scored significantly higher than highest scoring option on the former Vane and Penderian site. And they say it is therefore recommended that the school be built on the playing field site. Technical and build recommendations. Although both sites can accommodate the school of the required size, only the Goedrecoed site offers the size and flexibility to be able to accommodate the school which meets the standards and aspirations of the 21st century school. Again, they recommend that site. Mr Mayor, no matter what Councillor Colvin says, this Labour group will not be voting for a site for political gain. We know we're not hiding to nothing tonight. We are making a choice for the best site for the children and for the best facilities for their future. Mr Mayor, Mr Mayor,
Can you let the councillor finish, please?
Mr Mayor, I therefore move an amendment that the new Cllr school be built on a Goedrecoed site, and I'm fully in agreement that there should be a recorded vote. Thank you, Mr Mayor, and thank you everybody for listening fairly politely.
Do we have a seconder for that?
That's an amendment that's been moved. Is there a seconder for the amendment?
Yes, I seconded it.
It's also been suggested that there should be a recorded vote. Are there 5 members in favour of a recorded vote? Please show.
Okay, we're open to questions on the amendment again, please. Do we have any questions on the amendment?
Mr Mayor.
Councillor Barry.
Just for clarity, can you just point out exactly what we're voting on now?
I will do in just a moment. Unless there's any other questions, I'll do that right now.
Councillor Amos.
Well, it's not strictly about the amendment, but can I just make a comment? Which I find...
we're on questions now, Mr. Do we have any further questions on the amendment? No? Do we have any comments on the amendment? Councillor Amos.
Just a comment in general, really, and it's about what Councillor Barry over there said about not coming here with predetermined views. I'd just point out that the Labour group met last night to determine what was going on tonight. If anybody came with predetermined views, it was them. They came with predetermined views, nobody else.
Oh.
Councillor Barry, you can answer the question only.
I'll answer it by saying that Councillor Amos needs to remember that he's on record in 2 previous meetings of Standards Committee in this council saying that he's in favour of the Vaynor and Penderyn site. So he needs to be very careful, and there may be a standards referral after this meeting.
Bring it on! Bring it on!
Okay, order, please, order. Do you have any further comments? Councillor Barry.
Could I just make a comment in reply to Councillor Barry's comment about Councillor Amos? There's been great activity on social media about a photograph that's appeared of Councillor Harvey Jones compromising him in a very similar manner. So I think there may be a standards referral, and it'll also be another member in this room.
Any final comments? No?
Mr. Mayor,
Leader
comments
Councillor O'Neill.
on the amendment, or
Then, ladies and gentlemen.
Councillor O'Neill.
Yeah, thank you. First of all, just to round up, so I may not have the opportunity again as way things have gone tonight. It's not about time for us. We've been 9 months in the chair, so I don't appreciate being lectured on time. 9 months we've been in the chair to decide on this. This was other person's delay. This wasn't our delay. Like Tony, I have a link with Godricoid. My mother was brought up in Godricoid. I think somebody missed a spot here. It's not just about the field. Godricoid is an idyllic, lovely place. Tennis, cricket. It's the first time I saw someone in cricket whites. As a child, I went there, 5 years of age. It's a special place. That's why it's a field in trust, to protect that special place. It made Kevin Coyd-y-Cymru what it is, a special place. And people don't understand that. It's not just about the sport, it's the heart of the community. If you haven't been there, you don't know how it feels. There's nowhere else like it in Merthyr Tydfil. Some would say nowhere else like it in this area. We were to debate to build in a new school, and if I've been told that once, I've been told it 3 times. I was aware we were debating a new school, actually. But it's not really about a school. It's about that area. It's about consultation. It's about people having their say. It's about listening to people. You know, I feel like I'm in a pantomime. Look behind me. There they are. So don't question our consultation. Don't ask questions in our consultation, because they're you. They're in person. It's a preferential to build in a brownfield site. Estin, the school inspectors, say no preference. We can mitigate. We build massive engineering projects. They're doing something in the Black Rock at the moment. They're mitigating £58 million. Yeah? So we can make it happen. And the people of Kevin Coyd will make it happen. The consultation is overwhelming. Absolutely overwhelming. 85% respondents, 94% residents. Let me give you a quote from that consultation that some of you questioned. How dare you? Listen to this quote. My 9-year-old child attends a Cllr school, lives in Kevin Coyd, and loves playing rugby with his friend. They play on the field most days after school. It is the only place that is safe in Kevin Coyd for them to play. Taking the field away from them, you'll be taking away their childhood. There's always been a school on Vaynor and Penderyn site, so why not build a new one for the children? Why not build a new one for the children? The public care about the children, the parents care about the children. Councillors, the vote you're about to take tonight, and I'm glad you're so brave, yeah, about what this vote you're going to take, and how concerned you are about your reputations, will live you long past the elections, let me tell you now. And I don't make that vote to make anybody happy. I make that vote because it's the right thing to do. We were elected on the right thing to do. We listen to the people, and absolutely right the comments coming from Councillor Amos and Councillor Rogers. Tonight there is no hiding place. No time for keyboard warriors, for social media experts, for people doing forensic examinations of a consultation, questioning people on consultation. Tonight is to stand up and be counted in the bright glare of the public of Kevin Coyd. Yeah? Stand up here and be counted. Build on build on the Veyna and Penderyn site where it should be, where the people want it to be, where the children want it to be, where it makes sense.
Do we have any final comments before we go to the vote?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, if I could. I don't want to steal the leader's thunder, but just a couple of things I just wanted to say. You know, obviously there's overwhelming feeling amongst the community on this matter that's in front of us tonight. After all, it's the residents of our communities, as the leader, Councillor Amos and Councillor Rogers have said, that elect us all as members. 2022 is not that far away. I think the strength of feeling on this matter is evidenced by the numbers of residents present here tonight in the public gallery. I want to talk a little bit about the well-being of future generations because I think it's so important. Obviously, there's clear, overwhelming view expressed by the community through the consultation, but these views echo actually the objectives set down in the Council's adopted well-being plan. Focus on the future, well-being in our communities couldn't be more an apt title, really. The plan sets out the following: supporting existing community facilities and community-led developments, as well as promoting healthy behaviours from a young age and increasing physical activity. Priorities for this council, set by this council, adopted by this council, in terms of delivering on well-being for the future generations in our community. In closing, I would like to remind members, but I look to the back benches, in particular members of the opposition Labour group, who perhaps have got short-term memories, in that in their cabinet meeting on the 7th of November 2012, they were the lead group and administration in this council, which sought to nominate and secure the Veyna School Fields, also known as Goedra Coed, for the designation and protection under the Queen Elizabeth II Fields in Trust programme. It's quite interesting and ironic, really. Veyna Fields were the only fields at 2012 in this borough nominated for such a prestigious status and protection, and tonight they possibly could be under threat. The aim of this Fields in Trust programme was to protect existing sites that are used for sport, recreation and play. The QE2 Fields campaign was to create a branded and endorsed network of permanently protected playing fields as a visible, and listen to this, permanent grassroots legacy of the Queen's Diamond Jubilee and the 2012 Olympics. I've got the report if anybody is interested in seeing it. But Mr. Mayor, I think in closing I'll just say the loss of these fields could be a devastating blow and will be a devastating blow to the communities of the Veyna ward. Thank you very much. Diolch yn fawr.
Any final comments? No, what's happened here, Mr. Rogers, the amendment was made by Councillor Chris Barry, so the motion was actually put forward by him, and it overrules. Yes, but we're actually discussing the amendment, not the first motion put through. We're actually discussing the amendment. Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Chair. In my opinion, one of the most important responsibilities of a councillor is to ensure that our young people have the best education possible, to give them every opportunity to succeed in their lives. This report gives us a chance to provide a truly 21st century school environment for thousands of future primary pupils. For me, the priority is a safety and educational environment. I'm pleased that we have recently had a full review of this matter, both internally and by independent consultants, as I believe the previous report could not fully take into consideration the increase in volumes of traffic, behaviours and legislation we have seen since that time. It's been stated many times that the Veyna Penderyn site was previously a school, but the fact it was a secondary school and that the new facility will be a nursery/primary school appears to have been overlooked, Also, traffic volumes were much lower then. Secondary school pupils are aged 11 to 16 and with few exceptions would be expected to walk to school unaccompanied. The new facility would accommodate pupils of a much younger age, the majority of whom I would expect to be supervised on their journeys to and from school. This would mean more parents and children walking at school opening and closing times. Also more vehicles, as many parents take their school by car, as is the case throughout the county borough. Let's compare the two sites from a safety point of view. The Vena Pendarian site is located in a tight network of streets, many of which do not have pavements nor space to create pavements. Parking is already an issue, where residents park wherever they can, and I visited the area to see this for myself. This is a growing problem as the number of vehicles on our streets increases. Add to this a number of tight bends in the area where the view of the road is restricted. Also, there will be a need to create one-way streets. And local experience tells us that when a street is made one-way, driver perceived risks are reduced and speeds are higher in these streets. More pedestrians, few pavements, more traffic, tight bends, higher speed, and these are the facts. Surely, we need to consider these seriously. Contrast this with any of the proposals for the Godric Hoyd site, where a single access egress road, staff parking and drop-off areas would be designated to greatly reduce the risks to pedestrians. Also, the only other traffic using the southern entrance would be to access the school, other than a comparatively small number of residents of the Mice Gwyn area. Whichever site is chosen, the walk routes to school will need to be assessed, and the routes for the Vena Pendarian site will have many more issues than the Godric Hoyd site, as stated previously. Should the Vena Pendarian site be chosen, then school access to playing fields would need to come across Pontycapel Road, down Godric Road, onto the fields. This will require a supervised journey, which has been mentioned previously, which would impact on school resources and in our wonderful weather, a longer journey in soaking wet kit back to the school. The alternative is to have the school adjacent to the playing field where, when the weather permits, ad hoc use of the fields is a simple matter which would encourage more regular physical activity by pupils. The Vena Pendarian site is what it is, a misshaped piece of land that was suitable about 100 years ago, but we would restrict the design options for a new school built today. Yes, a school could be built there, but the design would be limited by the shape of the available space.
There's big space there.
The Godric Hoyd site would allow a design that meets the 21st century requirements of pupils in a pleasant environment that would encourage both learning and physical activity. As you will have read in the report, even the lowest access options appraisal scoring for the Godric Hoyd site is substantially higher than the best scoring Vena Pendarian site, which is nearly all negative outcomes. That said, the best score of Vena Pendarian option includes some of the playing field area and still accesses via Mice Gwyn. I believe that the previous consultant's report is now outdated, as many requirements have changed over the years. The Wellbeing Act 2016, Future Generations Act 2015, BREEAM requirements, and other changes has highlighted in the report. These changes mean that we have come to a difficult point in time. Is it more beneficial to retain the fields in their entirety or have a truly 21st century school and a rugby field? From the options available to us, we cannot have both. Because of the deed of dedication, any land used to accommodate the school would need to be substituted by at least the same amount of land within the community. The substitute land is named in the report and exceeds the land required to construct the school.
There's no land in the community.
Teddington's, one of the substitute field, is near the Godric Hoyd site and could be improved relatively simply. When making decisions of this magnitude, we do not have a crystal ball to predict the future. And I, for one, like most councillors here, do not have the experience or expertise to make an informed decision. And so we rely on our own professional staff, who I have the utmost respect for. And external independent consultants for guidance. They have no reason to give anything other than their honest opinions. And their recommendations are clear in this report. What I do know is that if we get this wrong, then it will be the young people of Kevin Coyd and the surrounding villages that will pay the price for many, many years to come. We have a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to construct a really 21st century school.
Sorry
and
to
I hope
interrupt,
we do
Councillor
not
Jones.
waste
Are you coming
that
to the
opportunity.
Are you coming to your conclusion?
Thank you. That's it.
Done. Okay. Thank you very much. Do we have any other comments? No. No. Already spoken, Councillor Amos. Any further comments? Councillor Roberts. Councillor Roberts.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Firstly, I would like to say thank you, say how extremely pleased I am to see that the funding has been made available by the Welsh Government for another 21st century school within the Borough of Merthyr Tydfil. If a decision is made tonight, and no doubt it will be, and future planning is agreed, then the pupils and staff of Cllr will benefit greatly from the new facilities for decades to come. Mr. Mayor, it's always difficult when Council has to take a decision like the one that has been made this evening. There will always be strong feelings, and unfortunately there will be some people that will be happy with the decision and there will be others that are not so happy. I would like to thank the parents and grandparents who took the time to write to myself and other councillors via email this week. I did reply to all of the emails. It is plain to see how passionate some of the residents are about the Goethe playing field site. As elected members, we must not let our heart rule our head, or indeed vice versa. We must take on board all the facts presented to us and make a decision based on what we think, as elected members, is the correct decision. Not only for the children and residents today, but more importantly for future generations, and that will benefit from the new school. Mr. Mayor, if members refer to page 87 of the report, there is a letter from Catherine Everly, the head teacher of Cllr, at the time of the consultation, which was dated September the 8th, 2017. I'm not going to read it, Mr. Mayor, because it is in the report. I'm sure members have read it. Mr. Mayor, it is the responsibility of the head teacher, teachers and the governing body of all schools to make sure that the children, when in their care, are safe at all times. The comments from Cllr must not be ignored. Therefore, taking these comments and the other information presented within the report into account, I must agree with the officers and the former head teacher. After all, the well-being, health and safety and safeguarding of the children of Cllr is paramount. Thank you.
Any further comments? No? Okay. We're going to put the amendment to the recorded vote, and I'm going to ask Carriage to clarify exactly what we were voting on, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The amendment then, and Councillor Barry can correct me if I've got this wrong, but the amendment that you are voting on is that the new Cllr school be built on the Cllr site. Yeah? So you will be voting for that motion or against that motion. Is everybody clear? What I will do is call out everybody's name in alphabetical order and ask you whether you are for the motion or against the motion. And obviously Councillor Amos is the first. So Councillor Julian Amos, are you for the motion or against the motion? Against. Councillor Howard Barrett. Against. Councillor Andrew Barry. Against. Councillor Chris Barry. For. Councillor Rhonda Braithwaite. For. Councillor Paul Brown. Councillor Brent Carter. For. Councillor David Chaplin. For. Councillor Malcolm Colbran. Against. Councillor Chris Davis. Against. Councillor Lee Davis. Against. Councillor Kevin Gibbs.
Against.
Councillor David Hughes.
Against.
Councillor David Isaac.
For.
Councillor Cheryl Jago. Councillor Clive Jones. For. Councillor David Jones. For. Councillor Harvey Jones. For. Councillor Gareth Lewis. For. Councillor Kevin O'Neill. Against. Councillor Gareth Richards. For. Councillor Darren Roberts. For. Councillor Tony Rogers. Against. Councillor Declan Salmon. Against. Councillor Tanya Skinner. Councillor Bill Smith. For. Councillor Geraint Thomas. Against. Councillor Ian Thomas. For. Councillor John Thomas. Councillor Scott Thomas. And Councillor Clive Tivy. There are 14 votes for the motion and 17 votes against the motion, and therefore the motion falls. Ladies and gentlemen, can you please come to order? Gentlemen, please, or you can leave, because we have not concluded the matter. All we have done is to deal with the amendment. We will now proceed to deal with the substantive motion, which was as proposed by Councillor Andrew Barry and seconded by the leader. We can then deal, Mr Mayor, with any questions or comments arising from what has been discussed since we concluded that debate, and then proceed to deal with that.
So on the back of that amendment falling, do we have any further questions?
The thing before you go, can I ask Councillor Barry to save me moving a further amendment? I'm sure to give notice to you. Can we add Councillor Amos on 2.4 as the leader of the independents in Dowlas and Pant? We are a group, so I think you should be also added as well. Is that all right? I don't know if you agree with it or not. If Councillor Barry agrees with it, he can put it in part of his. He can put.
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry for excluding. Yeah, absolutely. If we can include Councillor Amos in that consultation.
Do you have any further questions? No? Any comments? Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Can I say, I mean, people are talking about children being denied a proper education up in wherever the school goes up there, and that the smaller option is not a good option compared to the field option. I was chair of, I was a member of governors in Hillgerrig School for 20 odd years, and we were fortunate enough to get a small school, but that was built on a very, very small confined site. And I defy anybody to come up with a smaller site than Hillgerrig School is now operating on. And in all of that time, the education of those children in Hillgerrig has not suffered because of loss of facilities.
Any other comments? Okay, we're going to put that to the vote then, please.
Just for clarity on the vote we're taking now, because I'm very happy to agree for Councillor Amos to be part of the consultation ongoing, but I will be voting against the site. So I can't vote one way, you know, I can only cast one vote. Happy for Julian to be part of the consultation process, but are we going to need to take a third vote for that?
No, on the basis that Councillor Andrew Barry, who put the first motion forward, has accepted Councillor Rogers to be consulted, then there's no need to vote on that. So we are voting now on for and against of whether the school goes on the old Merthyr and Penderyn site.
Just to be clear, we are voting on the four parts of the recommendation as originally approved, subject to the addition of Councillor Amos. So it's 2.1, 2.2, 2.3, 2.4, and it's now been suggested that that should be a recorded vote. Are there 5 members in favour of a recorded vote? There are, yes.
Okay, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. We're now going to a recorded vote, and I'll hand over to Caris to take this forward.
Thank you. So, ladies and gentlemen, we'll deal with the process in exactly the same way. And I'll just call out everybody's name and ask you to tell me whether you are for or against the motion, and being clear that is the motion as now slightly amended on those 4 points. So, Councillor Julian Amos, are you for or against the motion? Councillor Howard Barrett. Councillor Andrew Barry. Councillor Chris Barry. Councillor Rhonda Braithwaite. Councillor Paul Brown. Councillor Brent Carter. Councillor David Chaplin. Councillor Malcolm Colbran. Councillor Chris Davis. Councillor Lee Davis. Councillor Kevin Gibbs. Councillor David Hughes. Councillor David Isaac. Councillor Cheryl Jago. Councillor Clive Jones. Councillor David Jones. Councillor Harvey Jones. Councillor Gareth Lewis. Councillor Kevin O'Neill. Councillor Gareth Richards. Councillor Darren Roberts. Don't confuse me. Councillor Tony Rogers. Councillor Declan Salmon. Councillor Tanya Skinner. Councillor Bill Smith. Councillor Geraint Thomas. Councillor Ian Thomas. Councillor John Thomas. Councillor Scott Thomas. And Councillor Clive Tivy. Thank you. So there are 17 votes in favour of the motion and 14 votes against the motion, and the motion is carried.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, and we'll move on with the last couple of items on the agenda, which are to deal with any other urgent business or correspondence. Sorry, Lisa. Let's start that again. Okay, last couple of items on the agenda to deal with any other urgent business or correspondence. I have none, and to receive communications from His Worship the Mayor, I have none. So, meeting ended. Thank you very much.